Recording in progress.
What's your swag situation?
Yeah.
For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
All right, we have a quorum, and I'm calling the Joint Metro Council and Merck Commission business meeting to order for July 18th, 2023. Connor, will you please call the roll for attendance for in-person and online?
Yes.
Because I cannot see online.
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. Okay, starting with the Metro councilors, Councilor Christine Lewis.
Present.
Councilor Garrett Rosenthal.
Present.
Councilor Juan Carlos Gonzalez.
Morning, President.
Good morning. Councilor Mary Nolan.
Good morning, all.
Good morning. Councilor Duncan Wong.
Present.
And President Lynn Peterson.
Here.
And the Merck commissioners, Vice Chair Damian Hall.
Present.
Commissioner Deidre Chris Rusoff.
Here.
Commissioner David Martinez.
Here.
Commissioner Danielle Milan.
Present.
Commissioner Deanna Palm.
Here.
And Commissioner David Pendleton.
Present.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Before we begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for our in-person attendees?
I'm Bob Lee, one of the animal curators here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a huge part of our job. We focus on the safety of our guests who come to spend time with us every day, the staff who works very closely with these animals, and for the animals themselves. I'm here at the Oregon Zoo and you're in the Metro Regional Center. The council chambers are located on the 3rd floor. In the event of a fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room. Go down the stairs to the 2nd floor, exit through the main entrance by the reception desk, and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you, and come visit us at the zoo.
Great, thank you. We will now open public communication on non-agenda items. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage the timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bring that up to me. If you're on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand button is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. And for those joining us virtually today, I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept a promotion. Once you accept that, you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, I will look for any hands or folks who would like to testify on non-agenda items. Councilors, we haven't had anybody sign up to testify in advance on this section. There was some written testimony that was distributed to you all yesterday. And President Peterson, I still don't see any hands coming up.
Thank you. And just to clarify before we close this, we have folks who have been asked to provide some testimony later.
Yes, for the later section of the meeting.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, just to make clear to me where they're supposed to be. Great. Seeing no one running forward. And there are no hands raised. I'm going to close the public communication portion on non-agenda items and move on. I just want to welcome the Merck commissioners. Thank you so much for being here. Just for a reminder, we've been doing this as often as we possibly can because of all of the things going on that we are trying to do jointly, and to make sure that we are moving forward together as we look at how to manage the venues, but more importantly, what is the future of our venues in this region. And there's a lot of stuff going on, which is great, because there needed to be a lot of stuff going on in order to move us into the future. So thank you. Our first agenda item today is our Venues Capital Improvement Program, and we have our GM of Visitor Venues, Steve Falstick, and staff that he can introduce. Steve, are you coming forward? Okay. Welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourselves when you come up. I'm just never sure who actually will show up. So I just want to make sure that you each have it, because there's more than originally reported.
Oh, good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Kinsella. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Director of Capital Asset Management at Oregon Metro. Nice to see everyone.
I'm Robin Williams. I'm Executive Director for Portland 5 Centers for the Arts.
Cindy Wallace, she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Director of Strategy and Business Development for the Oregon Convention Center.
Good morning. I'm Matthew Rochford, using he, him pronouns, the Executive Director of the Portland Expo Center.
Great, thank you. Steve.
And good morning, Steve Falstick, General Manager of Visitor Venues for Metro. I use he, him pronouns. We are pleased to be here with you today, and I want to just kind of thank in advance the folks who have put these presentations together. As President Peterson mentioned, we've got a lot of projects going on. We also have day-to-day business to run, and a couple of topics today that we're going to talk about speak a little bit to that, both our capital asset management as well as our rate-setting procedures, if you will, at each of the venues. I also want to say a special welcome to Cindy Wallace, our Executive Director, Craig Stroud. We actually allowed him to have vacation this week, and I think it's called a complimentary upgrade that we get Cindy today.
That's sweet. Thank you.
To
Try
pass
not to
on
blow
those-
it.
on those things. So I also want to give a special thanks to Ryan Kinsella for kind of leading this effort. Ryan is about a year into his job. He's just been fantastic to work with. As all of you know, the venues continually have capital needs, deferred capital, a lot of things going on in these amazing buildings that we have. And Ryan has jumped in and been supportive of the team and embraced that, and is really going to lead us through some great points. And then we're going to hear from the directors specifically on what that looks like for their venues. So with that, I'll pass it off to Ryan.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, again. And as I said, I'm the Director of Capital Asset Management at Oregon Metro. So in our department, we run the Metro Regional Center. We lead our sustainability and emergency management work. And then we support our infrastructure and facilities through the Capital Project Management Office and our newly reestablished Asset Management Office. We can go on to the next slide here. Thank you. Today, I want to set the context for how we plan for our capital needs at Metro. And first, I want to provide a brief recap. It feels like there's a little bit more on that slide than just a blank sheet. Maybe that'll show up here in just a second. Oop, go back a couple.
Stop sharing and bring it back.
I'll give you just a second here.
Yeah.
I can keep on going too.
Yeah. Sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yeah, no worries. There we go. All right. So first I want to provide a brief recap and a little bit of the history of capital planning and asset management at Metro. I then want to provide an update on our current status and our strategies for how we're building policies and practices to support our long-term capital planning needs while also addressing some of those near-term capital decisions that we know we need to make. And then lastly, I'm going to turn it over to the venue directors to talk a little bit more about their upcoming capital needs in the next couple of years. In providing this context, our goal is to really frame out how we can best plan for our long-term needs of our facilities so that they can continue to provide services to our community that are aligned with our values, specifically on building environmentally efficient infrastructure that is welcoming and accessible and inclusive to all of our community members. Go on the next slide. To start, I want to provide just a short recap of capital planning and asset management at Metro. Following an audit in 2016 of our capital planning process, Metro convened the Asset Management and Capital Planning Committee with the goal of creating a formal program, policies, and standards for how we manage our assets. Through that committee's work, and based upon the recommendations of a consultant, we adopted a strategic asset management plan, hired an asset manager, implemented an asset management system called Asset Essentials, and standardized our capital planning process. Go on the next slide here. Unfortunately, our progress stalled during the pandemic. The asset manager position was eliminated due to budget reductions. And the capital asset management department had some changeover in leadership, which has paused some of that work until this past year. When I joined Metro last summer, one of my primary goals was to unpause that work. So I reshuffled a couple of positions. I reclassified a vacant position and reconstituted a small 3-member team now led by our new asset manager to support the asset management work. Over the past 6 months, we've developed a work plan that has 3 goals. First, we want to make sure that we focus on maximizing the value of our current assets to all users. We want to make sure that our buildings, our compactors, our bear dens, our visitor venues continue to provide services back to the community. Our second goal is to support the prioritization of limited maintenance and capital dollars. There's always going to be a few dollars needed to support our assets, but by restarting our asset management program, this will help to plan for our resources, to help plan for the resources needed to keep our assets useful. Lastly, we wanted to identify any unmet needs and unfunded liabilities for our future CIP development so we could start queuing up those critical decisions. Go on the next slide here. Implementing an effective asset management program that informs good capital planning requires a handful of items. It requires condition data on our facilities, it requires an agreement on the service needs and those goals, it requires standards on how we rate our assets and policies, all of which take time to develop. We're working on those pieces as this slide illustrates, but we're also mindful that in the near term, we know that we have assets that have pressing needs, overdue roofs, failing cooling towers, inefficient HVAC systems that we need to address right away. To this end, we are working on the operational aspects of our program that will help the venues take care of their assets in the near term, but while also building out those long-term standards and policies that will help with the long-term stewardship of our assets. Go on the next slide. Building out this asset management framework is going to be a critical piece of how we do our capital planning, and ultimately helping us to improve our financial planning, avoid the service disruptions, and ensure that our investments reflect our priorities. So here's how we're currently working to take the asset management framework and put it into our capital planning process. First, we are defining and setting agency-wide standards for how important an asset is, that criticality piece of it, what condition it's in, and what level of service we should expect from that asset or facility. This is going to help identifying when it's time to spend money to renew or replace an asset, or whether we're willing to delay this investment for more pressing items. For example, we might be able to tolerate crumbling pavement in a parking lot for a few years if there's an alternative parking option. But if a cooling tower that's critical for services is in need of repair, then it might be a necessary cost to address. The second piece is that through the capital planning process, we want to identify unmet needs. This includes identifying assets that are in declining physical condition, but also identifying assets that aren't achieving our green building goals or creating barriers that limit access to our facilities. Ultimately, we want to have a good understanding of how much our total need is and how much of it is unfunded so we can start developing that investment strategy. For example, some of us just recently toured the OCC, where we heard about the investments made to achieve LEED Platinum status and how being designated as one of the 3 convention centers in the US with LEED Platinum status is an important part in attracting business. We want to make sure that as we're identifying unmet needs that we plan for the necessary investments to retain that LEED Platinum status, in addition to addressing other service needs such as ADA deficiencies and other more common facility components. The final way that we're going to be incorporating asset management framework into our capital planning process is to ensure that we have a consistent process for prioritizing investments where we'll use criticality, condition, and service levels to align project selection with desired outcomes. This is also going to help with the transparency in our CIP development and making sure they have some accountability in how we deliver on that capital plan. We'll go on the next slide. So fortunately, our current capital CIP development process includes a number of elements that support good decision-making in the near term and also give us a good process to build upon. This slide provides an overview of how departments develop their capital plans before being reviewed by CEO Madrigal and included in our budget process. First, venues and departments identify project needs. Second, venues and departments prioritize projects according to the values set forth by council and the commission and as articulated in key strategic plans. The strategic framework for Building Back Better, our strategic plan to advance racial equity and inclusion, department strategic plans, and I would anticipate the strategic targets that are being developed by our Tiger teams in conjunction with council. We also use a prioritization matrix where our departments score projects according to their legal requirements, health and safety needs, the resource efficiency, and service impacts. Next, our capital projects are then assessed in terms of the budget and staffing capacity and in compliance with our public benefit programs. So the Construction Career Pathways Program, the Clean Air Construction Standard, and our new Sustainable Building Insights policy. Finally, the CIP Executive Committee, which it consists of CEO Madrigal, our deputy CEOs, General Manager Steve Falstick, and CFO Brian Kennedy, and myself. We then take a look at that CIP and before it's included in the budget process for council's consideration and the commission's consideration. This provides just a shorter review of our capital planning process and where we're at with our asset management program. I'm now going to turn over the presentation to the venue directors so they can provide a short update on their near-term capital needs. And I think first up is Robin Williams, our Executive Director of Portland 5.
Okay, thank you. So we have a number of big projects that have just recently been completed, and probably most notably the Constellation acoustic system in the Schnitz. If there was a silver lining during COVID, it was the ability to continue this project that was already well underway at the time that we closed. It's a $9.8 million project, of which $3 million came from the private sector and $6.8 came from public sector. It's a terrific project because it benefits every single user of the Schnitz and really helps ensure the vitality of a really grand hall. So it's a really, really good project. The other really big project was the Schnitz sewer relocation. This was a project driven by the city of Portland and blessedly was paid for by the city of Portland, which we're very, very grateful for. So two huge, huge projects. We have a number of projects on the horizon. Most notably is the cooling tower replacement at the Schnitz, which I think you all are keenly aware of. Big project, very complex project, and that kind of really our number one project right now. But we're also having to focus on the Schnitzer roof replacement. It's time to get that underway, so we've got design going there. The good news is we've got $40 million from the VFIGA renovation bonds that we anticipate getting in 2026 that will be available to us to fund a very extensive list of capital. Right now, our most immediate concerns fall around the staff's bandwidth to manage projects. So we have a big shortage in engineering staff at the halls. That slows things down. We also have supply chain problems that are slowing things down. And most of our big projects require a no-event window in order to do the project. So in these really busy halls, we don't have very many times when we can actually get in and accomplish the work that needs to be done because of all the shows that we have available. As I mentioned, the cooling tower is our number one priority right now. It's essential for the well-being and of the hall and to be able to meet all the clients' needs. We also have some residents in the neighborhood who are very unhappy about the temporary cooling tower because of the noise that it makes, the vibrations that it causes. And while we only run it when we have to, and we don't run it outside of the noise ordinance that the city has, we are still very sensitive to our neighbors. So we're very anxious to get this project completed and closed out. This project's going to be very logistically challenging. It's going to consume a lot of staff time, and we anticipate it may cause some delays in some other projects that we have on the boards right now. We're accessing what we have the ability to do and shifting some of the priorities around. So those that have more safety, security priorities, we can try and get those rolling. But really, the cooling tower is really going to be the big all-consuming thing, at least for the next 5 months. So that pretty much concludes my report on our capital at this time.
Can I just ask for clarification, on the capital, private, public breakdown, more information on where the public came from? Was it
The
all
pub-
City of Portland, or was it also Metro?
It was City of Portland.
Okay. Thank you. Counselors, commissioners, any other questions at this point? Just take a break. All right, next, go ahead.
All right, here we go. Thank you, President Peterson, counselors, and commissioners. I'm Cindy Wallace, the Senior Director of Strategy and Business Development for OCC, taking Craig's place today. I'm so very lucky. Thank you for having me. As many of you know, we paused all capital improvement projects because of COVID. We had just finished $1 million renovation in October of 2019, and then, of course, shut down in March of 2020. So there hasn't been much that we have necessarily accomplished since we've been back up and running. We have a glazing project that you've been communicated to that we are currently working on, as well as a variety of others. But when we're figuring out our 3 to 5 year capital improvement plan, we take several things into consideration. First and foremost, forecasted funds, conditions of our assets, what we hear from clients about their attendee needs, if space will be taken offline, how the projects will impact already booked business as we book 5 to 7 years out for conventions, the estimated timeframe of a project and that impact, and how we can repurpose, upcycle, or recycle any of the materials from the renovations. Once we've taken all items into consideration, we then prioritize the projects. Some larger projects to note, we're going to be kicking off this year about 8 projects, but the larger ones to note are a front of house public safety console, as well as a complete renovation of our A and C meeting room restroom banks. So we are looking at the feasibility and mainly the funding feasibility of having those be single-use, all-gender restrooms. And that's it.
I'm sorry, can we go back to the beginning? You said that there had been a capital improvement that was communicated. I didn't.
It was a glazing project.
Glazing,
Yes.
I thought you said lazy.
Oh,
I was like, there's a lazy project?
it's a glazing project of our spires and our
Yeah.
crescent. So, which is just to uphold the maintenance of the glass and make sure that rain doesn't come through. So yeah, we started that this time last year.
Yeah.
And so we can't work on that project when it's raining. So it paused starting in November, and then we kicked it off again this spring.
Not a lazy project at all.
Not a lazy project, no.
Okay.
Sorry, glazing project.
That was just me.
Yeah, no.
Thank you.
Question on
Go
is the
ahead,
glazing
Counselor.
project complete?
No, we started it this time last year. We started on the crescent, and then it wasn't complete, and then it started raining. So this is a project that we're hoping will finish by October of 2023, but that all just depends on the weather. And we are also mitigating the event impact on that.
Okay.
Anybody else? Counselor Lewis, and then Connor, can you please monitor online? Because I do not have the ability to see anybody online.
Yes, there's
Okay.
one question online from Commissioner Milan.
Okay, Counselor Lewis, and then the Commissioner.
Sure, thank you so much. Good to see you, Cindy. I'm curious what the time horizon is for making decisions around the next steps for the building renovation. Because obviously the north end has gone through its major overhaul and it looks beautiful. And I know there are plans, and I don't know how many phases are in those plans and what those timelines look like.
For, say, the meeting rooms or Portland Ballroom, so some larger renovations?
Yes.
So we'll start those in fiscal year 25 through fiscal year 29, and it's a phased approach. So it will be the D, E, and F meeting rooms phase, so we'll only at any one time take off a meeting room bank at any one time so that we still are an attractive venue with all the different hotel packages so that we can host larger conventions. And then the Portland Ballroom in 2029.
Okay, great, thank you.
So all the A, B, C, D, E, and F meeting rooms and the Portland Ballroom are already scheduled out.
Wonderful, thanks.
And then the commissioner online.
Milan?
Hello. Yes, I just wanted to circle back about the bathroom renovation project. So you mentioned the single use, no gender bathrooms, and then I assume that the regular bathrooms will stay in place. So somehow we're adding more bathrooms or we're changing bathrooms. Could you clarify that?
Of course. So we're going to look at the feasibility as far as funding and how it will work within the venue on a complete renovation of the A and C restrooms. So they would be then single-use restrooms. So we've looked at Lincoln High School and as well as OMSI have renovated their restrooms to be single-use, all-gender restrooms. So that's what we are taking into consideration. So to perhaps help you envision what that would look like is that you would, as an attendee or staff, you would walk up to a variety of different doors, floor to ceiling, enclosed, where you would open, like water closets, enclosed where you would walk in, use the restroom, walk out, and use a communal wash stations.
Great, thank you,
So
Steve.
if people don't want to share, though, are there going to be options for attendees to have, gender-specific restrooms?
There will continue to have options of gender-specific restrooms, yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
Steve.
Speaking of clarifying, maybe I heard it, but Cindy mentioned $1 million renovation that was completed. 40 million was the number on that,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I said $1 million?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Oh,
okay.
I'm sorry, 40, sorry.
I was like, I thought it was way more than that.
40 million that was fabulous, that was completed in end of 2019.
Awesome.
Thank you, Steve.
No worries. Commissioner.
Okay, Chair Peterson, Cindy, I believe it's 2025, you're going to have your largest conference group coming in. What does this look like in terms of, are you going to have to hold off on some of the work? Or are you going to prioritize moving some of it more progressive to get it done, to be prepared?
That's a great question. We will continue with the capital improvement projects for the spaces that need to be pulled offline because it's been a 8 to 10 year plan. And in order to disrupt one, it will disrupt the entire flow of the phasing that we've already put in place and booked around. That has already been communicated to that larger group. And we use the hotels, the variety of different hotels in the area to supplement meeting room space that we might not have online. And then the other renovations that would occur, we would have target dates to be completed with those, so that event would have very little impact.
Great. I just have one question before we move on, Matthew. I had the opportunity to have dinner in the new Seattle Convention Center. Amazing. How is that affecting our work and our attractiveness? And are there other venues on the West Coast that we are also competing against that are new or about to come on board?
Good question. I mean, Seattle is, we do compete with Seattle, but they are a different market and they have a lot of corporate attractiveness where we don't, we're just not there yet. So I don't believe we're necessarily losing business to Seattle because of their renovation. Other cities that we do heavily compete with in Washington is actually Spokane. And so it tends to be a destination that's attractive to the convention business that is looking at us as well.
Yeah, this is completely new. It's not, the original is renovated,
Yes.
and then there's this brand new one.
Yes.
Yeah, it's amazing. So thank you for clarifying the types of business. But what have we looked into what it would take to get into that market? No.
I'm like, does he want me to answer that? Me?
Yeah.
No, I mean, have we looked at it in the past?
Well, what we need to get into the market is we need more hotel rooms.
Okay.
We need more hotel rooms surrounding the convention center.
Yeah,
That's what we need.
interesting. All right, thank you. Chair? Oh,
I think it's you, Bates.
Can you just, Cindy, if you remind everyone the cities that we do compete with, and maybe tell a little bit why, you just said it's because of the hotel rooms, but if there's anything else that we should know just as the group, I mean, I don't know if everyone knows that.
No.
Who we all compete with and why we're in that group.
Right, okay. So we compete with, well, I said Spokane. We do compete with Seattle. However, they are simply a higher tier market than we are. So if someone's going to come to Portland and see us, they'll most likely pop over to Seattle and or Spokane. But those two, Long Beach, Denver, Salt Lake, Phoenix, even sometimes Albuquerque, that's the bunch, yes. And a lot of that is because we are similar size convention center, that we have a similar airlift, that we are a similar size city and have pre and post attractiveness. And our association clients or our convention business, they'll go on what we call a rotation. So they'll hit the West Coast, Central, or East Coast. So when they're looking at the West Coast, then those are the groups of cities that they're combining.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know I knew it, but I didn't know if there were.
Yeah, no, thank you.
any other comments?
Cindy, do you think that transportation infrastructure has a lot to do with that as well?
With our attractiveness for convention business,
Yeah, if you're going to compare
absolutely.
it with another tier of a Seattle, you know, the airport, but the transportation piece is more, shall I say, developed in many ways?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry, so that was a positive or a negative?
It's a positive.
Okay.
Our transportation,
And what-
Max Light Rail, our airport,
Thank you.
yes.
Okay.
And I will say, we've always been at a deficit and probably always will be as far as, the hubs that airlines feature. But first of all, the port has done an amazing job increasing capacity both domestically and internationally, which is good. But, one of the great things that we have with public transportation is that we provide complimentary passes for convention users that come to town that can use our wonderful transportation system. We know we're a little bit disjointed on hotels, the river being in between that, but we offer a great solution with a great transportation program that we have.
Great, thank you.
And Councilor Nolan has their hand up.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm interested in knowing, understanding that we're coming out of the pandemic and it is hard to make trend projections, but what's the market demand doing in this part of the convention industry that we occupy? And secondly, within that same space, what's the available inventory? Have there been big expansions, new centers that affect our market challenges?
I don't think that, we have the Seattle, the new building construction that I believe was completed in February of 2023. But other than that, I don't know of a lot of convention centers that have really undergone any major projects in the last I'll say 3 years, in the last 3 years. So many convention centers are in the same situation that OCC is in, and any other event venue is, we're building back our business. And we're now starting to gain that business. We're not nearly where we were in fiscal year 19. That was the best year that we ever had as far as our revenue. And that was also during the $40 million renovation where we took half the building offline for 6 months. So I think that all of the convention centers across the nation are just starting the same process that we are, which is looking at their forecasted revenue and where they can invest it in improvements. And as far as a market, we're not nearly as back as we were before, but we are gaining in inquiries and leads, and with our marketing contract with Travel Portland, we just retained a new marketing agency that assists us with our citywide convention marketing. As far as Portland as a destination, I think that we'll see some really fresh, new ideas coming out of this agency that will help Portland in the market and help change the dialogue that's been going on for the last 3 years. So we're in a good place, but there's still a lot of improvement to be made.
Quick follow-up, if I might, Madam President.
Yeah.
Are we seeing any changes in the split of our visitors, by which I am interested in? I don't know what boundary you would measure within 50 miles, within 100 miles as local as compared with national or international. Are we seeing a shift in that split?
Yeah, I'll take that one on. We've got a fair amount of data, right? But what we do know is in fiscal '23, convention business was extraordinary, and that convention business, comes from around the U.S. Some of it local, some of it regional, and that's to great benefit of the commitment to building the Hyatt Regency. And 2017 to 2019, all the conventions that Cindy and her team hosted and we enjoyed were extraordinary because we had that hotel in the package and were able to really both accommodate pent-up demand for Portland as well as new and larger business that was there. That said, the rest of the lodging industry, I would say, struggled in 2023 coming back outside of the convention business. And those markets, from leisure to business travel to corporate to government travel, were all down significantly, and their comeback is significantly slow. We see in Oregon that the downtown Portland is hurting the worst, and typically we enjoyed a lot of travelers from the radiuses that you had mentioned. They are staying at the periphery hotels at the airport and at Jantzen Beach. Vancouver, Washington is enjoying amazing, robust business, I think, from a lot of that share that we used to enjoy. And then secondarily, statewide, I think the numbers continue to be very strong with, the spots that folks visit, Oregonians visit, or folks from the Northwest visit, whether it be the coast or Bend or, Joseph, you name it. They've actually performed quite well comparative to how downtown Portland has, and that recovery has been slow.
Great. Do we have any other hands up? All right, we'll move on. Thank you. Matthew.
Okay. Good morning, Council President Peterson, Chair Stoudemire Phillips, councilors, commissioners, staff. Quick thank you to all of you that were able to join us at our recent tour, as well as join us for the Juneteenth Rodeo. I really appreciated seeing all of you. Also, later in the rate presentation, I want to welcome Alicia Crawford-Luz, our sales and marketing manager, that she'll be joining us a little later. And I believe Cindy was a little bit humble. Out of the competitive set, Portland's the best. OCC's the best. So we have to talk ourselves up because it's true.
That's right.
And we need to live that in our minds. So back to Expo. The Expo CIP was developed with lots of input and discussion, as mentioned before by my peers. But also, a great deal of that input comes from the operations team, and that includes, from our side, Chuck Dills, Daryl Jones, our engineer, Mr. Tom Nast, and our continued work with our finance manager, Will Norris, CPMO leadership, John Lindenthal, Ryan, and others. But we also look at our asset management plan put out by the Cardinal. We call it the Cardinal Report. Many of the buildings have done that, and that gives us a good gauge of where the status of these various assets are for the Expo Center. The Expo has a number of annual long-term projects such as HVAC, roofing, and asphalt maintenance that occur each year, but again, due to COVID-19, were suspended, not only for funding measures due to the TLT pooled capital drop, but just so we could rev up and get ready for our Expo Futures project and meet the COO's recommendations just made just this last February. So a little bit of a cart before the horse, making sure that we're ready for those decision points. Some big projects that were completed that would be of interest would be the Metro levee outfalls. The design piece was completed this year. We're at 90% drawings. The Metro began that MOU with the City of Portland that coordinates the repair and replacement of the two outfalls within the levee parallel to the Expo Center and the Columbia Slough. Last fiscal's work included the review and the design documents. Now at 90%, we're on track for both scope, schedule, and budget. Reviews and approvals have been made and taken place with the Army Corps of Engineers and Metro Multnomah County Drainage District. And while we may not see immediate construction, we're in the queue for that timeline for our two outfalls out of many along the levee. We completed also the Hall E transformer replacement. The team took care of that. That transformer itself could have taken down part of half of Hall E. It was considered somewhat of an emergency. We got that done within budget and on time. Also, the City of Portland directed us to complete a backflow, which is a little frustrating. It was working fine underground. The requirement is now above ground for access, so that is now completed. It should be noted, however, that pre-COVID, the Expo Center completed the barrel roofs over the Expo Center, which are very large and expansive, also under budget and done in a sustainable way. But what that allows for us is an exciting and expansive opportunity in the solar power options. So we've looked at that with some coordination with community partners as well as the Expo Futures team. A few of our big projects on the horizon, you'll note, the spaces for the HVAC system that are due for replacement in both Hall E and D. As the recommendations came in the February timeline, our capital project plan was already submitted through the budget, but we are in midst of review with over 15 plus units to replace, and the experience that just happened for the Schnitzer, we want to make sure that we're reviewing this and making it our top priority for network controls, and making smart investments, because the supply chain to just build those does take quite a bit of time, and then the installation thereafter, as well as timing, as Alicia and Cindy will mention. Expo is also undergoing a Hall E micropile study and repair. That's something that when I first came aboard in 2011 and 12, we started to see some dipping in Hall E, which was repaired with some micropiles, and so that needs to be looked at once again almost 10 years later. We've added some security improvements. Again, for the area, that's been a theme for all of the buildings. There are security improvements throughout on their capital planning, and so we're very pleased to see those moving along. Again, with partnerships, it's always great to have partners that help you with the financing of projects. The sidewalk repairs and the canopy that leads up from TriMet Max up to the Expo Center is an area that is targeted. And now, as well, we have Levy Restaurants, our F&B partner, that will be investing in our facility for their food and beverage opportunities, as well as a target towards our sports futures. While we are looking at other ideas in terms of sports futures, we're also looking at things like rolling stock and other items that would help support bookings of that area. COVID, of course, hit us very hard. TLT pooled capital was which funded many of our capital projects, was reduced, but is now returning slowly. Some short-term things, we've got a fire panel that does need replacing, unfortunately, but we've got a great bid on that. And again, kudos to the team for taking a look on that. Our ongoing concerns continue to be halls A, B, and C. It's a waiting game. We have to judge these things about what we're going to spend and our timing and what we're going to do. We want to make sure to protect those assets for as long as that timeline takes place. And again, I mentioned our solar opportunity for the infrastructure, perhaps some EV charging stations with our asphalt repair and other opportunities, and then, of course, expanding our Expo B project and other sustainable items. That kind of concludes my report with just high-level touch points for you.
Great.
Hopefully.
Councilors, commissioners, questions?
Just in the wire.
Anybody online? Commissioner Martin?
Yes, I just wanted to just make a comment and just share appreciation for all the work that's happening. I think in the Merck Commission meetings, we hear about a lot of the challenges and opportunities of recovering post-COVID and just the realities of the new way of doing business in terms of how conventions and different visitors are considering and continuing to consider these venues. So I just wanted to just, highlight the tremendous amount of work and the impact that it's making as we continue to recover.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis?
Sure, thanks so much for touching on the work that you're doing to maintain the facilities all while balancing the sport future and the community use that we envision going forward. 15 air conditioning units right here as we are in the midst of some of the hottest days ever on record.
Yep.
Absolutely the right direction to go. But how do you finance 15 units all at once?
Great question, Councilor. As you know, your support through sustainability to replace one of our units most recently was very helpful. I think we're in talking with Steve and Will, and as well as Chuck, we're working on that plan now. For our budget as it stood, we were looking at 2 per year, but we really need to move more swiftly. And because of the timeline, by the time you decide you need it and they have to build it, we're talking 9 months. So we may be looking at a sort of an overlay between fiscal years and that summer timeline that'll advantage the monies in the existing fiscal year, bridging against the new year, and doubling our efforts. So we're doing, say, 4 at once or 5 at once and marching that way, cutting our timeline in half. Tom Nast, our engineer, in working with the other HVAC companies, has come up with a great plan to build efficiencies for some of the costs, as all of us know, is just about laying out the equipment to mobilize. So when you have them all mobilized, you might as well install as many as you possibly can. So that's our efforts now, and you should be hearing more soon about what that new plan will look like.
Yeah, and I will add, and, we obviously, you're going to hear an amazing report on sports futures coming up. And as we look at capital, it's not going to wait, right? But we do want to be smart about what we're doing that, isn't going to be redundant to, new construction or whatever may happen out there. So when we talk about A, B, and C with a lot of deferred capital, we're keeping those running. Instead of a roof replacement, we're looking at roof repairs. But then we're also kind of reassessing, like we're just finished a fiscal year. Where are we at financially? Things have changed, quite honestly, for the positive. And how do we get more strategic with what Matthew and his team have done with CIP plan, a 5-year that was created without Sport Expo in mind. Now Sport Expo is in play. How do we do that? We know that Hall's D&E, for the most part, 99.9% are gonna be there and be existing, and we need them to be running. So how do we pull from other areas to really push, and instead of doing them 1 or 2 at a year, try to get as many done? And it doesn't need all 15 to ensure that the building maintains their operational abilities, but we do want to get as many as possible within that. So, like I said, financial changes, strategic changes with sports futures have really changed directions for us from where it used to be with Expo to where kind of how we look at that today.
I think I'd only add is that both D&E are really in a very standard basic level right now, and there's nothing but upside potential about everything that could be done with those halls, from ceiling treatments to the walls, you name it. You only need to see what 40 million did over at the other building at the convention center, how lovely it is to be able to see all the possibilities that are there. So again, just scope, schedule, budget.
This is for all of you, as we proceed forward on the strategic target goals of housing, economy, and climate change, and we're working with a lot of you and other external stakeholders to try and figure out what that target is. Is it a multivariate target? Is it a single target? How do you see yourselves helping move that conversation and being able to create that action plan then for the next 5 years to be able to start to move the needle in that direction? My thought was just, Matthew, when you started speaking, I'm like, it's a big parking lot. It's a heat island unto itself, right? And if we were to start planting trees, we would reduce the number of opportunities for large outside shows. But outside shows are also hot. Are there ways in which we can look to the future for capital improvements where we're actually, if you're repaving, we should be looking at more of the green infrastructure and getting more trees into that parking lot and reducing our portion of the heat island effect. So just, that was one of the things that came to mind while I was thinking in my head about how these strategic goals are going to affect how you guys think about moving forward with your capital plans.
Agreed. And the solar opportunities, there was an interesting dynamic, talked about the parking lot itself, about having areas where they're like almost carport areas where the parking lot is still in use, but it's still advantaged as a solar piece. Now, that's an interesting concept I had not heard of before, but was brought up by the community groups. Also with our walkway plan was to replacing trees that are damaging the sidewalk, replacing those perhaps with things like cherry blossoms and other items that speak to all the different types of things that we're doing for our coming cultural pieces as well as the sports piece.
I see.
And I think as we, consider again, along with Sports Futures, the future of that 53 acres, without question, we want to be taking in to account the sustainability piece. I think the tour that we had was really great. I had side comments about stormwater management, bioswale opportunities. Obviously, we're also tracking interstate bridge replacement to see kind of what that looks like. But we are poised both operationally as well as our internal departments to make sure that we maximize those components that, are certainly, part of the strategic target, but are also just really, really good business. So those without a doubt will be folded in and not afterthoughts in the project.
Commissioner.
I'm just, if you can help me, I'm not clear on, with the buildings out there, with 100+ events a year, what are the two buildings that you're really focused, or is your top priority in terms of work that needs to be done?
I would say definitely the flagships, Hall E and D, because that's where the main investment is, and that's where the largest big ticket items are in terms of the HVAC, then secondarily with the lots. But again, other items such as that, I think we need to realize that building is 1996 for Hall E, 2001 for Hall D. So they're not necessarily new. So some of the basic systems for the infrastructure should be addressed before we start dressing and covering up areas that would create more cost in the future. It's really about making sure the bones of the building are refreshed and ready for this new revitalization. Now, ABC, on the other hand, is another, just a larger discussion to be had. So, but the clear path now is Hall D and E to make sure that we're ready to go.
Counselor, did you have a question?
No.
Okay. Anybody online?
Nope.
Counselor.
Thank you, Madam President. I didn't hear anything in any of the presentations about keeping up with technology and technology advancements. And I know, as events progress, we'll need more things like bandwidth and things like that. Like, is that part of a capital improvements plan to think about how we keep up with, all the kind of new AV advancements that might come out, or having faster internet and things like that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one. I think that's part of like the asset management plan and the asset management strategy is really anticipating service needs over the long term and building out the infrastructure to anticipate around that. Same way we'd, plan for sort of like future like ADA needs of like those facilities. I think technology is a big component of it. I'll say that in our work on asset management, that's less refined about where I've seen what that long-term planning could look like, but I think that's like really good feedback and direction guidance that we should be thinking about. Maybe some of those technology needs like a little bit like more specifically, but I'd lump them in right into like what we do with like our asset management strategies. And I don't know if like the venues have specific.
I could just add briefly, Yeah, for the Expo Center, we recently had a client that required higher bandwidth, so we were able to make that expansion, and through that partnership with the client, we were able to get that and not only pay for it, but continue that on. So now we have 100 meg for everybody, as well as a Cat 6, shout out to Metro IT for the Cat 6 redo wiring, really not that long ago. So infrastructure-wise in that department, we're really doing a lot better than we were.
And is that like, you just call the provider and ask for more bandwidth, or does that require physical upgrades?
It required some physical changes as well as, a change in our contract. Of course, it's not going to be free, but again, that was the beauty of working with a partner.
I would say for P5, we absolutely have to stay on top of technology when it comes to all of our theatrical systems, because our major tenants are producing tenants, and they require that high level of sophistication in theater technology for sure. And along similar lines, also in terms of safety and security, in terms of camera upgrades. And we recently put in the new Evolve systems that allow, better screening as people come in. And that's one of the, most high-tech pieces out there today, so.
Okay. Anybody else? Keep looking at Connor.
No questions.
Okay. Go ahead.
If there are no further questions,
There are
I'll move us
none.
to the next portion. I'm
Awesome.
inviting up now Will Norris. Will has also been with us about a year and has just been extraordinary, as all of you recall from our budget sessions. Just very well thought, great data, obviously great reporting from the finance side, but also very instrumental in providing data and resources for the venues to make better business decisions. So he is going to lead the next portion for us.
Thank you, Steve. I'll wait for the PowerPoint.
One moment.
Just waiting for the PowerPoint. Is that coming up?
Yeah, it should come up in just a second here. Here we go.
Great, thank you. Council President, Chair, councilors and commissioners, I'm happy to provide an overview of the Metro rate setting process today and general rate setting strategy for the venues. Next slide, please. So I'm going to begin with the rate setting process at a high level, and then talk about how revenue from rates fits into the overall MERC business plan, and then wrap up by noting some of the current trends that are placing pressure on venue rates before handing it off to the venue managers, who are going to talk about more venue-specific strategy. Next slide, please. So first to the rate setting process at a high level. Next slide. So MERC rate setting is really grounded first in its public purpose. The venues have a mandate to support regional economic development, promote the arts, and provide public access to its specialized facilities. These mandates are rooted in the taxes which originally built the visitor venues and also continue to support their operations. And so the venues actively tailor their rates and scheduling policies to meet these objectives. The venues must also operate in a self-sustaining manner. Next slide, please. As an enterprise fund department, the venues supplement public support with user charges to meet both operating costs, but also help support capital investments. The goal is to neither operate with a profit or loss, but to operate in a financially responsible manner while being good stewards of their publicly owned facilities. Next slide. A third unique consideration is market competition. Unlike other enterprise fund operations, like a water utility, the venues do not operate with a monopoly. The venues must remain price competitive with venues in other regions, as well as alternatives for arts and entertainment patrons. The venues regularly perform benchmarking and market studies to ensure their rates remain competitive. Next slide. So these three considerations can sometimes be in conflict and often require some balancing of interests, which is the role that the MERC Commission plays. Next slide. One of the MERC Commission's primary roles and responsibilities is setting rates, charges, and use policies for the venues. This power is specified in Metro Code. Rate and use policies are recommended by venue staff and then approved by the Commission via resolution. Rate resolutions can be for a specific time period. For instance, Resolution 22-07 passed most recently in last September, sets OCC's rental rates for fiscal years 27 through 29, which is key for convention center business, which books many years in advance. Rate resolutions can also be standing rate policies, which were in place until modified. For example, Portland 5's most recent rate resolution set rates for fiscal year 21 and then has allowed annual 3% increases thereafter. Next slide. So that's broadly how rates are set, but now I'd like to talk about how user rates fit into the venue's overall business model. Next slide. As noted, the goal is to operate sustainability with neither a profit or a loss over the long term while making continual investment in the facilities. This graph shows how operating revenues and operating expenditures have tracked over the last several years. Outside of the pandemic, the venues have generally operated with about a 9 to 12% operating margin. This modest operating margin ensures the venues are not drawing against reserves during normal time periods, and also provides some additional funds for capital investment. And the structure of the venue's operating revenues is as follows. Next slide. So the first component is lodging taxes, and this is a key source of income, but it doesn't come close to meeting the venue's full operational needs. These come from 3% excise tax as well as an allocation from the visitors facility trust account. Next slide. Tax dollars are augmented with direct public subsidies. This includes ongoing support from the City of Portland for P5 operations, but also has included direct support from the Metro General Fund during the pandemic. Cumulatively, taxes and government support produce about a third of the venue's operating income in FY23. The remaining income must come from earned income. Next slide. I'll get into earned income now. So the most sort of well-known and understandable is rent. And rent is the base charge to enter the facility, and it mostly supports overhead. Next slide. Oh, next slide. The largest source of earned income is charges for services. These are direct charges for services. These include items like parking revenues, ticketing fees, food and beverage sales. These charges are by and large paid by patrons attending the venues. These revenues first offset direct expenses like purchasing food or paying parking attendants, with the remaining profits supporting general venue operations. Next slide. The last type of charge is direct reimbursement for venue services provided for events. These are pass-through payments for services like stagehands, ushers, utilities, or equipment use. These charges are tied directly to expenses incurred by the venue to support specific events. Next slide. And lastly, the venues do have some small ancillary sources of revenue, the largest of which being interest earnings. However, this full graph illustrates the venue's revenue mix for fiscal year 2023, but it's important to note that this mix fluctuates year to year based on tax receipts or changes to MERC operating costs, and charges for service must be continually managed as a balancing factor to ensure that the business continues to operate sustainably every year. Next slide. So now I'll discuss kind of what are the trends placing impact on rate pressures and changing how this revenue mix may need to evolve over future years. So next slide. And next slide. Thank you. So first is lodging taxes. Lodging tax recovery has lost some momentum in the past several months. This graph shows actual lodging revenues as compared to their pre-COVID growth trend. Essentially, this is pre-COVID growth trend is what lodging activity would have been if it continued to grow at the same pace it was in December 2019, as if the pandemic never happened. So lodging activity initially came to a near standstill in the early months of the pandemic, down about 90%. The recovery from there on out was robust and fairly linear through 2021 and the first half,
of 2022. This recovery trajectory, however, has started to plateau in the last 6 months. The current tax levels are sufficient to fund operations, but not enough to resume pre-pandemic levels of capital investment. If lodging activity does not improve, this may place additional pressure on operating margins to support venue capital investments. Next slide. Another pressure is operating costs. We're all aware of the impact of inflation has had on our personal budgets, and the venues are also paying more for materials and services. The West Coast Consumer Price Index since 2018 through 2022 is up 18%. But outpacing even general inflation is the venue's personnel costs. Wages and benefit increases have contributed to an increase in total loaded hourly costs between 31% and 36%, depending on the venue, between 2018 and through calendar year 2022. These compensation increases are important to recruiting and retaining talent in a tight labor market and also ensuring a livable wage. However, these costs also directly impact organizations renting the venues and their patrons. Next slide. Another recent pressure on operating costs is the need for increased public safety investments. This has included 3 new public safety agents and a new public safety manager, and the Evolve screening system that Robin mentioned. That's a less invasive alternative to a magnetometer at Portland 5. 3 new public safety agents and a public safety director at OCC, as well as additional event-driven part-time public safety appropriations across all 3 venues. In total, these additions have contributed roughly $2 million, or about a 70% increase in public safety expenditures between the FY23 and FY24 budgets. So increasing costs, stagnating tax growth, and increasing public safety needs are forces that are affecting all 3 venues. I'll now pass over to venue management to discuss their more site-specific rate-setting process and strategies in more detail. I believe starting with Cindy on this one. Next slide.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, President Peterson, councilors, Chair Stoudemire Phillips, and commissioners. The MERC Commission, as Will said, he took some of my bullet points, but the MERC Commission approves OCC rental rates. And so we go in front of the MERC Commission every 3 years and stay ahead up until what he had mentioned. We have approved rates through 2029. We have our furthest out booking for convention business in July of 2030. So we are right in alignment with what our booking pattern is to date. Service and labor rates are reviewed and done annually. We negotiate, and to give you just an understanding of, we establish these rates, we use market comparison to do so with the rental rate. So we compare the markets that I was talking about before, and when I say that, I mean the cities that we compete against, and what their rental rates are for their ballrooms, their exhibit halls, and their meeting rooms, and how they charge for services, as well as any supplemental funding that those cities give to compensate for rental costs, similar to our VDF fund. So once we establish those, then we negotiate rates based on a variety of different things. We negotiate need year, need period with any need year. If it's a diverse group, what the maximum visitor development fund support could be, if the hotels will provide a larger room rebate for us to be able to get any certain type of convention. Some strategy around that is that we meet quarterly. We have a convention sales steering committee that is made up of all of the GMs of the convention hotels as well as myself, and we talk about the bids that we have that have yet to say that they want to come to Portland. So we talk about, do we need to put more funds to supplement rental? Do we need to discount rental more? Do we need to add any type of funding to help supplement transportation? Do we want to fund a hosting reception or staff meals or staff breaks? so that we can put our best bid forward to get those pieces of business that are interested in Portland, that have come and done a site visit, but they haven't yet selected Portland. So that happens quarterly. Monthly, we have monthly, we have a business review. That is with all the directors of sales of our convention hotels, as well as Travel Portland and our director of sales, Monica P. That's where they talk about how to present the best bid moving forward and what, based on the RFP and the request from the convention piece of business, what it is that they are interested in or what is going to be the deciding factor in selecting a city. And of course, we want that to be Portland. We are also managed within a scheduling and/or booking policy that is approved by the MERC Commission. And this establishes how we book our business, and it is based on priorities. So we have first priority or second priority, but those priorities are defined as projected overall economic impact on the state of Oregon and metropolitan area of Portland, total number of hotel rooms required for the piece of business, projected revenue to the facility, both in terms of direct space rental revenue, as well as projected revenue for food and beverage or other building services, and then of course the potential for that piece of business to want to come back to Portland. And that's all I have.
Questions? Counselor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What are the comparison or rates, since the lodging rates is a significant portion? What are the comparison with our major, you might say, regional competitors, Spokane and Seattle, in terms of both ticket, rental rates as well as lodging rates overall? Do we have a comparison of that? In other words, are we in between those two?
Our rental rates are very similar. As far as for the convention center to convention center, our meeting rooms, our ballrooms, and our exhibit hall space. However, Steve, you can.
Yeah, so again, as I mentioned a little bit, the state of kind of the lodging industry, from a average daily rate is the indicator they use for that. We most of the top 25 cities in the U.S. that we rate against, as well as our competitors, have significantly either gained back or already exceeded 2019 in their lodging rates. Portland still has a long way to go for that. That's the bad news. The good news is, pre-2012 or 13, Portland was always known as a really affordable place to do business, not only without sales tax, but reasonable hotel rates. With the hotel boom and the demand, in kind of 2013 to 2018, those rates exponentially grew in Portland, so we kind of lost a little bit of that competitiveness. So depending on how you look at it, no, they're not back, but boy, are we more competitive than ever for convention business and helping build back the overall lodging comparison.
And Steve is part of that too, because we, during that period of time, added a bunch of hotel rooms as well, and we have more coming online.
Yeah. Without getting too much into the weeds, when there's that much of a 40% increase in hotel rooms in downtown Portland, as a former hotelier, water has to find its level, right? And those hotels were never able to do that because COVID dropped in the middle of that. So as we've heard, there are a lot of hotels in dire financial straits right now. There are others who are trying to figure out, who they are and where that balance is between occupancy and ADR. But I think the net from all that is rates overall are ultra competitive, is how we choose to see it. If I was a hotel owner, I'd say differently, but booking conventions, they're ultra competitive.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Counselor Wong.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I know you mentioned you have a competitive advantage of not having a sales tax, and I'm wondering, what the sentiment for booking, visitors and things like that. How much is that a selling point? And also, do our competitors, in other jurisdictions that have sales taxes, do their venues get a portion of that as part of their kind of share of revenue?
Yeah, I'll answer that last one. I don't know specifically, but potentially, right? And it may not come in the manner of facility support. It may come in support of the destination marketing organization like Travel Portland, or in, the Sports Commission is one that's very commonly supported by sales tax. That being said, and Cindy, please feel free to add, but, historically in selling Portland, it was no sales tax, was always number one. And that is significant for convention planners when they're planning these massive conventions with hotel rooms, with food and beverage, with other spending. And that worked against, for us, at the time, very poor airlift, very poor hotel capacity, no convention center hotel. There was a lot that we were working against. The good news is now we've caught up in a lot of those, and I'm talking COVID or reputation aside, we've caught up competitively in a lot of those other ones, and quite honestly, sales tax might be third or fourth or fifth thing mentioned about the awesome things about Portland and Oregon. That said, it is significant, and I know we are once again leaning into that more than ever when we are looking at associations, especially who have struggled through COVID, who are looking for more of a deal. That certainly plays into the part of lower hotel rooms and, our partnership with hotels and with Travel Portland to, for the greater good of Portland, not just for convention center specific of bringing that business to the city, but it's still very significant.
Helpful, thank you.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. This is fascinating. I love the kind of long-range economic horizon conversation. On that similar thread, we talk about convention bookings. Obviously, there's a timeline, right? A timeline delay versus what we do now, and the conventions that we have right now were booked a long time ago. And so there's, I'm wondering what is that looking like between now in the next 4 to 5 years, and then also the kind of the second half of that question is, things might be a little gloomy, or the numbers might not be as fast, or the V-shaped recovery might not be as sharp, but we are investing in ourselves as a region. We know that PDX will be ready soon. Eventually we'll have new bridge, new Rose Quarter, all those things. And so there's a series of projects that are being lined up for eventually maybe 2030 or early 2030s to really enter the global sector, the global experience in a different way. And we see that with the NCAA bid that Sport Oregon is working on and whatnot. But I guess that kind of question in terms of for the rest of this decade, for the 2020s, what can we really expect in terms of that recovery? And then maybe it's treating it as a strong incubation phase as well, and really investing in our infrastructure and ourselves to enter the next decade very competitively. So looking at it through a very long range horizon, how does that make you feel as operators and managers of these venues, while understanding that we do want to have a very strong, next 7 years as well?
Yeah. Cindy, I'll let you answer the first part, just as far as kind of what the next few years are looking like.
Yeah, well, it makes me feel very hopeful, right? I mean, we have nowhere else to go but up. That doesn't mean that things are dire, but we can get up and surpass our best fiscal year, which was fiscal year 19, without a doubt. Now, pace, we're a little bit behind on pace. Some months, I would say in the next 3 to 5 years, some months are stronger than others, but overall for those years, we're a little bit behind pace. But we have a strong strategy with Travel Portland and their new marketing agency. We are utilizing the zero sales tax as one of the top 3 marketing, because it is appealing to our association planners. And what we're doing better about that is talking about their bottom line. They'll save about 20% of their budget if they actually book in Portland versus if they were to book in other cities. So it is financially attractive for our planners in that state. So I think we're hopeful. We are putting a strategy together. We are meeting quarterly and monthly, so that we can turn that business that would have otherwise perhaps selected another city. So I think we have a good path forward.
Yeah, and Cindy and I have been at this a long time, just as far as the convention piece of it. And, it was dire, back in 2001, 2002. It was more direr back in 2009, 2010. And yet, we've got an amazing destination, right? And that's what we're bullish on. That being said, when you look at the things that are out there, overall, but certainly tourism-related, sports futures. You look at the Keller project, the potentials of that. You look at Interstate Bridge and how that's going to change the region. You look at all of these amazing footprints like North Portland with PIR and Delta Park. You look at the amazing work with our sports commission that has gone from 0 to 100 in 5 years as far as, bringing business and developing the destination. So, is it going to happen by the end of the summer? No, but we know that we keep our shoulder to the wheel as an industry, and there's much brighter days ahead, not only to catch up, but to blow out of the water what we did as well. And again, having an eye on 20, 30, 50 years down the road with some of these massive projects that Metro is currently involved in working on.
Yeah, and if I could follow up as well, I think in addition to all the things you mentioned, we have the work happening on the community side with Almina and the Phil Knight investment into reactivating. There's the conversation, ongoing conversation about, Major League Baseball in Portland and continuing to activate a potential events district. And so, again, I see the kind of more the optimism on the horizon of that opportunity. And I guess as MERC commissioners, as Metro councilors, as industry leaders, really kind of connecting to that shared destiny future and amplifying our wins on the public sector and the private sector, and also on the community sector, to help us tell kind of the new story of what we want to project to the world. And not to say that our city's brand is like our most important thing. It is an important thing, and how we retell that story, because there's a story being told about our city that is impacting our business clearly, and how we retell that story is going to be informed by really the decisions and the strategies that we lean into each other with ourselves, and over these next few years. So I see the hard work that you're doing, that we're doing, really strong strategy. I see that. And also I feel like it's a really great incubation phase for us to really rise stronger. So
And again,
the optimism.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, just the COVID building back, but better, right? So I think that's the, unintended outcome maybe has really caused us to focus. So we're better, we're more resilient. We are, I think, much better community and regional partners, as we move forward with an eye on that is only going to benefit, these big projects that we have, but the core of how we do business and how we, not just welcome, but reach out and embrace the underserved communities and the underserved peoples in our region. So I think there's a lot of work left to do, but I think we are poised to have some good progress on that.
Councilor Lewis and then Councilor Rosenthal.
Sure, thank you so much. I think that we compete really well in using our partnership with Travel Portland. Not only are we playing to our advantages, but we're doing it in a clever and very Portland way. So really proud of the work that folks are doing to get people back in the airplanes, trains, and cars coming here from regional, national, and international conventions. That's the economic driver. That is the point of the OCC. It's the economic engine. But I'm also thinking back to our last budget conversation where council was very concerned about making sure that the space was accessible, obviously not years out, but months out to our community groups. And I'm kind of surprised we haven't touched on that today. But where does community access come into play with rates and rate discounts in terms of local groups wanting to have a festival or a dinner?
Right. Well, first of all, we always negotiate with any of our local groups and what their needs are. But part of our racial equity plan is to have a program where we haven't yet decided on what that's going to be called. At one point, when we wrote the racial equity plan during COVID, it was a grant program, but we're not quite sure if that's what we're going to call it, because what we first want to do is actually have a community engagement program to find out what is it that our local communities need from OCC so that they can book within our walls. And so we are working with procurement on an RFP that should go out in the next 30 days to have an agency perform that community engagement for us. And then from those results, we'll put a program together that is an official program for our community partners. But we are always talking with our community partners that want to do business with us or are interested in how we can make it work for them within our walls.
Fantastic. And I do think that making sure that the program is custom, because I think the needs of a festival are really different than the needs of a breakfast. And really being able to meet people where they're at. And I get the appeal of a grant because people know what they're applying for, but I think just really meeting people where they're at. And, you know, sometimes it's not money on the table, sometimes it's access.
Absolutely. That's why we don't want to make those assumptions, and we're doing the community engagement project first.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councilor Rosenthal and then Commissioner Pendleton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good and exciting things that are going on, as Councilor Gonzalez said, and Travel Oregon, the sports, or Travel Portland and Sports Oregon, as well as developments such as the OMSI development site and things like that. There's a lot of good things that are looking forward. But the speculation has been, as you know, in the media, that probably the biggest headwind that we're facing is the reputation, the perceived reputation of downtown Portland as a destination, as a sort of a dangerous or unpleasant place to be. And I just wonder if you would comment whether you think that significantly affects both the convention center and the P5, and that it might be different as how it affects the Expo Center. Can you comment on that?
Go ahead.
Sorry, that's a bit of a loaded question.
I'll let directors go
I mean,
first.
I think there is, it does, what's going on downtown does affect, but I do believe that things are getting better. And as far as convention clients and how they think and feel about Portland, that perception is improving. And so I don't know if it's monthly or if it's quarterly, but we do survey convention clients and the perception of safety in Portland, and then the perception of feeling welcomed. And they're pretty much in alignment ever since COVID. And so, and that's increasing every time we do a survey. So things are getting better. And it's all about the story that we tell, right? And it's all about how often we can get in front of media, in front of our clients, national and local, to say that we are welcoming and we are safe and that we want you to come to Portland.
And I would say for P5, since we all work downtown, we definitely can see an improvement. And if audience attendance is any indication, where we're still seeing some reticence in coming back downtown, it's really with our much older audiences are still very slow to come downtown. However, the younger audiences are coming down in force, and our Broadway audiences, which are largely folks in their like early mid-60s, are coming in and selling out the shows. So we're seeing it more across demographic lines. Overall, though, I think we're seeing a huge improvement over from when we first opened in 21.
Counselor, for the Expo Center, I would say it's about being vigilant on your campus itself, making sure that if there's graffiti, that it's taken care of right away. Our ops team is doing wonderful for that. But it's really about, we can control our campus, but we have to work with our partners, both the city, ODOT, PBOT, TriMet, everybody, the port that's around us, for different impacts, because the impression of the area falls to us as the host. So if somebody's coming from out of town, they have to take that exit, they have to see that, and they have to feel like, how am I feeling with my family attending this event? So we want to make sure that we're assuring our patrons when they hit the gate that we're safe and welcoming for all. But that takes working with our partners, being on a lot of calls and telling those teams what needs to happen. And again, shout out to the Red Patrol with Metro for doing such a great job.
Yeah, and I think overall, you know, the industry, the community has been working this, right, with partners, and, you know, it's important to go back, and we're specifically talking meeting planners, right, around conventions. You know, single attendees are gonna have their feelings and their perceptions, but this is a big part why we were proactive on the safety and security front within venues, right, to ensure that, okay, we can't control Burnside Street, but we can control the safety and the feeling of safety within our buildings and in the surrounding areas. And that's why there was a significant increase in that. And meeting planners want to hear that, right? They want to know that we're not just sitting on our hands and saying, oh, well, we're, you know, like any other big city, that we are proactive and that we can give assurances. And, you know, all the venues have partnerships with their, you know, local police and other services that are out there to, you know, help in this process of, again, of feeling safe. Can we ever say that Portland or any town is completely safe? We can't, but what we can do is take several steps, and the teams have done a tremendous amount of work along with our partners like Travel Portland, like Business Alliance and others to make improvements.
All right, Commissioner.
Well, first of all, Steve, I want to say to you and your team and to your partner, Travel Portland, that with all the challenges, overall, you're making great strides moving forward. Sometimes we forget the impact of Portland when they say so goes Portland, goes the state. And when you look at the TLT, Portland and surrounding area makes up about 44% of that 14 billion yearly. So it's a huge impact statewide, whether it be Clackamas, Washington, or thereafter. I know that on the conference side, there's been, since COVID, about 20+% of new event planners that's come on. So there's a training, educational development piece that has to take place there. And my question to you in terms of that particular piece, what are your thoughts, or what are you doing to, you know, educate them on what the Portland market has to offer?
Well, we're getting out in front of them. So we have a robust sales mission program of work with Travel Portland. So this OCC sales team, as well as our convention hotel partners, have a extensive traveling schedule so that we are at all of the industry conventions, that we are at trade shows, that we are hosting events, that we go to their location, have presentations, talk with their attendees, with their event planners, and make sure that if they have questions about Portland, we're out in front of them and we're the ones answering them.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that's, you know, Travel Portland has never had a more robust calendar, right, as far as getting out in front of people, right? And a lot of it, as always, was getting out in front of it to talk about how Portland's the perfect destination for them, but we're also armed with, you know, being able to get in front of the safety and security questions and issues, and maybe we don't have all the answers, but, you know, being able to talk about, you know, what this is puts people at ease. And one of our, you know, a year and a half ago at a customer advisory, we heard some like shocking feedback, you know, from someone that had a horrible experience and it was just devastating, and 9 months later, they booked their next convention in Portland, right? So, again, we can't just close our eyes and pretend it's not there, but I think collaboratively, you know, the right people are talking, big things that we maybe can't impact, but what we can impact, we're being very assertive with having those conversations.
Commissioner Hall.
Thank you. Thank you, President Peterson, and thank you to the venue directors for the presentation and all the great work you're doing. I just want to, you know, probably second something that Councilor Gonzalez had mentioned. It really is like a singular moment. It's been a few years and kind of a hard few years and been a myopic focus on some of the challenges so that our city's gone through. But, you know, there's across a whole lot of projects, a lot of which we've talked today, a lot of which Metro touches or has co-jurisdictional partners who are both involved in. But even beyond that, a whole lot of interest in and appetite for and momentum behind investing in how to, you know, make things better, a resurgence of the city, a resurgence of the region, all those type of concepts. You know, it seems like we're kind of at a turning point instead of that kind of focus on, oh, woe is us, the things that are going wrong. Really kind of figuring out how to, you know, turn the ship and figure out all those, you know, the component parts of that. So really appreciate the professionalism of the folks at the venues and being the adults in the room and managing through all of that and the day-to-day and all the component parts of what that took for years. And hopefully we can help capture some of these opportunities around resurgence and around sort of the public sentiment and the shift there. Thanks.
Oh, Commissioner Martinez.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly highlight that, again, in the midst of this, there's some really incredible steps around diversity. I noted that the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity was held here in Portland last year. The Advancement for Chicano Hispanics in Science, the SACNAS conference, is being held here at the Convention Center, the Juneteenth Rodeo. And to me, it just highlights that even in this sort of norming stage that we're in, as far as moving forward, that we're still really, you know, holding true to a lot of the, I think, you know, the values that we have around equity and around inclusion. So again, just want to sort of lift that up because in the midst, we're really making some significant strides in being accessible and attracting national organizations like NCORE and SACNAS.
Or you just explained in the most simplistic form I have heard how we're coming out of COVID and we're still storming and norming. We don't really have values as a society coming out yet. And I think that what we're seeing is really good professional work on the convention side. But I just want to take a moment because yet another pedestrian was killed by somebody who was DUI driving just yesterday in Portland, a librarian who a lot of folks know. And, you know, we are all facing this across the United States of how do we come back out and act in a society, and how do we care about each other? And I just want to say thank you to all of you who are very front-facing. It has been a storming and norming period as we work through the societal issues that we have. They aren't just Portland issues, they are societal issues. And I think we as Metro Council, I know, and I won't speak on every councilor's behalf, but the reason we're so interested in wanting to engage in the venues with the MERC Commission and with our wonderful staff is because there is so much going on and they are all so interconnected. And your success is built on the success of these other things that we've talked about that Metro has a part and parcel or has a voice in. And we want to make sure that we are all moving in the same direction in terms of being able to find that new place where we are norming together and we find that new agreement, right? The societal agreement that we are all in this together and we are all working together. I think we kind of lost that for a while. And so thank you. You've just solidified it in my brain in a completely different way. There is an end to this, but we need to be vigilant about working towards that. So thank you. Did I miss anybody's questions? Because we haven't gotten through all the presentations on the rates. And I just want to note that it is 12:13. And council does have an executive session after this, and councilors have things booked after that executive session. So I am going to ask that we run through this. If there's any questions as we run through the rates that you can hold and ask staff later, I'm going to ask you to think about doing that, and then we're going to go into public comment. And then we still have the Expo Futures conversation that we need to fit in here. And so if I can just see a raise of hands of everybody who can run overtime. All right, that's not enough. We're gonna need to move this along. So why don't we finish the rate? Yep. So why don't we finish the rate conversation and do public comment, and we'll just save questions on the rates for another time. All right, go ahead.
Okay, commissioners and counselors, as well as Rhett said, we rely on our conversations with the commission, who does approve all of our rates and fees. And we establish these through pretty deep discussion with the MERC Budget Committee. We talk about what is the climate that we're coming into, what extraordinary costs are we facing, and how's the bottom line ultimately going to look? Because as an enterprise fund, we can't just continue to go into the fund balance and burn down reserves when those are desperately needed at this point in our time to help fund capital. And so we look at what's needing to be funded. Is there new things? For example, this new fiscal year 24, we're for the first time funding a very robust DEI team, which we've never done before, and that money has to come from somewhere. So we look at all of these things to start talking about, is there a need to increase fees? We don't just automatically do that. We look at a history of past increases to kind of see what we've been doing over the year and whether that makes sense or not. We also do market studies of comparable venues that are in similar market and size as we are, to see where we are in terms of rates and fees with them. To give you some context of historically what our rates and fees have looked like, I'm going to cover the three main charges that we have: rent, user fee, and labor charges. Our rental fees for our groups, with the exception of commercial shows have always paid the full meal, top market cost. We've had more flexibility with our other tiers. For the past 20 years, those increases for our nonprofits have been held at 3% or less for 20 years until FY23. What prompted a look at rates and fees, there were a couple things that hit us just before COVID, which was a $200,000 increase in the lease that we pay for the church, for the land that the Hatfield sits on, and $300,000 in costs because of the pay equity that required our rates that were, more, we could have had MERC rates and there were like Metro rates, and now those needed to come together and be like all the same. And that was about a $300,000 increase for P5. So going into a new budget, there was $500,000 of new costs, not to mention all the usual utility rates and so many other things that took that in. So we had come out with a rental rates increase. COVID hit, we stopped everything, we froze rates. And then until 2023, we were like, we can't sustain no increases. We have got to bring those back. And so working with the commission, we came up with a 3-year plan. Over a period of 3 years, we were going to increase our nonprofit rates back to the original tiered plan that the commission set in 1995. Prior to 1995, there was one rate. Everybody paid the same rate. In 1995, 4 rates, well, really 3 additional rates were created: a nonprofit rate, which would be at like a 20% discount of the commercial rate, a featured tenant rate, which means you produce, you're not producing here, you're presenting, but you're doing a season, you get a 30% rate there. And then a resident company rate, which are primary users. They produce their shows here in town, and those groups were given a 70% rate. Now, over the past 20 years, we got away from that. So the plan was, how do we get them back to the original intent that the commission had planned for when we set these fees, which are actually more in line with our peers around the country. We also wanted to look at our ability, or currently our lack of ability, to provide equitable subsidies to our community at large. So we've been sort of, supporting and subsidizing one community, but we need to broaden that community to be more inclusive. And then so our users, people who are renting the hall to, present and produce their shows, look more like our community. So we implemented this 3-year plan. The commission approved it. However, the city of Portland for last fiscal year 23 and this current fiscal year 24 have agreed to pay for the increase for all the nonprofits. So the nonprofits were continuing to hold at those prior rates because the city is subsidizing all the nonprofit rates. In FY25, they will return to the increases that the commission has approved, and we have communicated all of that to our users. It should be noted that Brunish Theater is rent-free for all users. It's an incubator space. We have minimal staffing tied to it to try and keep it as affordable as we possibly can, which is why we've been able to capture a BIPOC theater company, Passon Art, as a regular tenant in that space. So it's doing exactly as we planned. The user fee is a fee that was intended to be paid by the individual ticket buyer. Very common fee in the performing arts industry. Oftentimes it's put into a fund to pay for capital, or it goes into maintenance, which is in our case. This fee was established by the commission in 1997 originally at 50 cents for resident companies, and then 6% of the ticket price for everybody else. That 6% for nonprofits featured in commercial is still in place. That has not changed. Resident company fees have gone up and down over the years as we've tried to monitor what's happening in the economy. Some years they were held, other years there was like a minor increase. But basically, a 25 to 50 cent fee over a period of years landed into what we currently have as a $3 fee. The commission generally puts together a multiple year plan so we can, clients can anticipate, as far out as possible what those fees look like. We don't just automatically re-up them after that. We leave them as they are as long as we can. Our current plan right now is the $3 user fee. There's no increase plan for 24, so that is not being increased. Probably the number one cost that our users face, this is all users, is our labor. And our labor costs are based on negotiated wages and any benefits that are paid out. As Will said, between FY18 and FY22, our average staff compensation has increased 31%, and this is due to negotiated wages increases, some expanded benefits, and other personnel cost escalations. We usually we tell the groups as far out as we can, based on the CBAs that we have with the union, here's the increase that you can expect over the next few years as far out as we know them. And so this is the other labor increases that our groups have seen in recent years is largely due to security for all of our events. It started with originally the active shooter incidents that started in Europe, in Paris, and the US realized they better get it together to be proactive in this, as well as our current downtown security issues. So we've, as Will has mentioned, we've added a lot of security costs and additional security people to events to make sure that the events happen safely. All event labor, which is stagehands, ushers, stage door security, box office staff, if they use them, are passed on to the user groups. So just in summary, really of the three rates, The labor rates are really the ones that we're feeling, from our viewpoint, is a pinching point with many of our groups, including our commercial groups, because it's one of our highest costs to the users. But that gives you a little bit of the history of kind of how we approach our rates and fees and how we kind of manage them going forward. So that will conclude my report on rates.
Thank you. Expo.
All right, good afternoon, President Peterson, Chair Stoudemire Phillips, Councilor, Commissioners. Very similar to our colleagues at the other visitor venues, Expo sets our rates on a 3-year basis as well, approved by the Commission. These allow us to attract our large-scale events that use multi-hall space that need 18 months out to plan their events. This serves 2 purposes for Expo. First, it locks in 75 to 80% of our year-over-year business. Locking in Expo's largest revenue generators allow us to solidly forecast known revenue up to 3 years out. Secondly, it creates a lot of staff efficiencies. We have a sales team of 2, and that lets us shift our focus to our pickup business, which is about 20 to 25% of our annual business. Similarly to OCC and P5, we also conduct market rate analysis on our comparable venues in the region. This allows us to maximize our revenue by remaining competitive and affordable for a lot of our community and regional partners. We also take into account that we have different service structures than other similar venues in the region, such as exclusives on electrical, ticketing, parking, etc. Historically, we have increased rates by 3 to 5% annually. We did this even during the pandemic. We did not hold on rates. We chose instead to work individually with promoters that requested assistance who were continuing to do events at Expo. However, we know that we would fall behind on inflation if we did not continue to drive rate. So that was our strategy. Typically, our events also begin accruing costs between 12 and 18 months out. So setting our rates also allows our promoters and partners to set their budgets accordingly. So they are in a good spot financially. Driving rate also, just like I mentioned, lets us keep pace with inflation so we don't lose ground on our increases with labor, utilities, and other overhead that is included in our rental packages. Customer impacts, our goal is to keep our rental increases modest so that our venue does stay affordable for most of our users. And that is something that we see. So our continued rate increases really kind of create a minimal impact to our promoter and user groups. So that is something that we found, that strategy that works really well for Expo and other community users. So that concludes my report. Matthew, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to commend the sales team too, because they shifted very quickly in the sports market focus and had some real considerable success, not only with the cornhole group, which some of you got to see, but a number of other groups, and as well as bids on CrossFit and some other things. It's an exciting time, and I think I'm really proud of how the team has shifted and done the work. So kudos to them.
Great, thank you. And again, comments, questions, I think we're going to have to hold them, get those to staff, and maybe follow up next time we get together and have a more in-depth conversation, because we do have a public comment portion of this conversations. And so I will now open up the public comment on the Merck venue rate setting report. Connor, will you please describe to our audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on the Merck venue rate setting report, now is the time to do so. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage the timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you have not already signed up to speak, you can do so now, either by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing it to me, or by raising your hand on Zoom. Depending on your version of Zoom, the raise hand button is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those dialing in on their phones, you can also raise your hand by dialing *9. For those testifying via Zoom, I'll be promoting you to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept the promotion. Once you accept it, you'll be able to rejoin, where you'll be able to unmute yourself and turn your camera on. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, councilors, commissioners, we do have one person who has signed up in advance to testify, and I see somebody else who has had their hand raised. So we'll start with Scott Showalker. Scott, I'm going to promote you up. All right. All right, Scott, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera now. You'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Hi, Scott Showalter, President of the Oregon Symphony. I appreciate these 3 minutes and especially Councilor Lewis's encouragement to speak today. Metro, we need your help. The performing arts are in crisis, especially in Portland. Downtown safety remains the #1 reason why patrons are not attending. As ticket sales are down, our P5 fees are rising at record rates. Our hall rents are relatively modest compared to other cities, although we bear outsized ancillary costs. Yes, we pay hall rent. Also, a user fee for the hall, stagehand labor fees, separate stagehand labor payroll administration fees, stage door attendant fees, usher fees, security fees, facilities fees, security traffic control fees, production house packaging fees, medical technician fees, utilities fees, engineering fees, custodial. Our piano rental fee is quadrupled. For a stage extension, we're charged an extra $10,000 per day for the week. These are fees that other cities do not push onto their nonprofits. Overall costs have risen by more than double the rate of inflation in recent years. As the Symphony sells some 200,000 tickets, at least pre-COVID, that 50 cents per seat that Robin mentioned earlier equates to another six-figure charge to the Symphony. Today, we pay to P5 56% more for the same production than we did just 5 years ago. Per our national research, the Symphonies is the highest percentage increase in the country. Yet Metro forsakes thousands of dollars in nightly revenue since P5's concessions and bars are never staffed properly. Other resident companies likewise have myriad concerns with the hall's management. Here are a few brief examples from the Symphony. First, P5 severely restricts the days and nights available to us, and so we're forced to perform on Mondays, the hardest night to sell tickets. Second, as audiences have been slow to return to our hall, P5 has asked what the Symphony would do to make up for their lost user fees. Third, P5 informs the Symphony of rate hikes months after we go on sale with tickets. This backward cycle leaves us to contend with surprise charges. When the Schnitz's HVAC system recently failed, we moved to the Keller and lost ticket revenue, and yet P5 charged us even more for a total of $35,000, more than wiping out the city's partial grant to help cover P5 rate increases. Fifth, security remains a concern. When a stalker known to the FBI rushed our stage twice during a concert, the hall's head of security staff said she didn't know what to do, so untrained Symphony staff were forced to intervene. Finally, as P5 has enlarged its own staff, approved by Merck last year, the Symphony this year was forced to cut community access programs and eliminate 10% of its staff. Alarmingly, these issues now impede our own fundraising. One donor said that he would not make another major investment in the Symphony until he knows that his gifts aren't merely subsidizing government agencies. Fortunately, though, most of these issues can be fixed. I would ask soon that Metro and Portland reconsider the terms of the agreement for Metro to operate city arts venues. I'd also ask that an audit of P5 be conducted, new and concerning fees to resident companies be eliminated, and Merck Commission commit the overall fees to us nonprofits remain in line with overall inflation. I thank you for listening to my rapid fire speech. I hope that this will be the start of a conversation as a special organization shutter across the country. On behalf of our resident companies, I appreciate your help now before it's too late. Our union representative is here today too, Chris Hubbard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have them up next. So Chris Hubbard, I'm going to go ahead and promote you. All right, Chris, you should be able to unmute now. You'll have 3 minutes and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Peterson, councilors, Chair Stoudemire Phillips, and commissioners. My name is Chris Hubbard. I'm a member of the Musicians Union Local 99. The members of my union work for many of the resident companies and featured tenants of P5, including the Oregon Symphony, Portland Opera, Oregon Ballet Theater, and Stumptown Stages, and others. Our employers and many, not all, but many of the local arts organizations that use P5 actually pay their performers a living wage. They are unfortunately in the minority of performing arts organizations in our city. Please consider the Merck Visitor Venues public service mandate to promote access, support the arts, and drive economic development. Sustaining living wage performing arts jobs falls into all three of those categories. I'd like to especially point out that if artists are not making a living wage, The people who can afford to make art are not going to reflect the true diversity of our community. Paying artists living wage is an equity issue. We know that P5 supports local organizations by giving discounts on rent, but rent is actually only a small portion of the cost P5 charges. You saw this in Mr. Norris's presentation, where direct costs passed on to users far exceed rent. The average is at about 1.5 times what the rent is and can be up to 9 times more than rent. A nonprofit organization that is given a 20% discount on rent actually is receiving only about a 5% discount on the total cost to use the space. That's not really supporting the mandate of Merck. So please consider this mandate and re-examine the discount tiers so they will apply to all of the expenses of the organizations using the venues, and keep P5 accessible for local organizations that support living wage jobs for local performing artists. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, with that, I will give folks in the audience another second or two to get their hand up if they would like to testify. Once again, we're taking testimony on the Merck venue rate setting report. With that, President Peterson, I don't see any other hands go up, and there hasn't been anybody else signed up to testify.
Great, thank you. With that, seeing no one rushing forward, I will close this portion of the public communication on the rate setting report. I think we're going to need to bring this back, maybe with some policy questions surrounding that conversation, so we can kind of hone in. I think this has been a good overview, but I think there's some general overall policy questions that we're going to need to develop to have that conversation, and maybe Chair Stoudemire-Phillips and I can work with staff to bring those forward. Thank you so much, though, for all you do every day. It is such a big, important part of the Metro portfolio, and we very much appreciate the work that goes into it, so thank you. All right, we're going to need to move our conversation on the Expo Futures to Thursday with just the council. But in the meantime, Paul Slyman and staff are working on an email update to all of us on the Expo Futures process, and I'm sure that they will be able to come and talk to you separately as well. I apologize for that, but we are kind of under the gun for time at this point. So I don't know if we want to just forego COO communications.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Nothing urgent.
All right, thank you. And counselors, any communications, commissioners, any quick communications, updates, brags, boasts? Okay. Thank you for that. With that, again, thank you, Steve, and everybody for that wonderful overview. And we will close out the joint Metro Council Merck meeting.
Council President Peterson, can you please announce in public session while we're still recording the executive session?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear any of that. Could you slow down and?
Yeah, absolutely. We just need to announce that we are going into executive session. Yeah, this is going over. So again, if you could just announce the purpose and executive session that we are adjourning into as Metro Council. Thank you.
We will be adjourning into an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub D to conduct deliberations with persons designated. I'm still speaking.
Thanks for coming.
Please be quiet. By the governing body to carry on labor negotiations. Thank you.